Good morning. This morning, if you'll turn to the same place we was last week. Let's see. Let me give you a hint. Proverbs chapter 3. We're going to continue on in Proverbs 3. We got through verse 12 last week. We're going to start today in verse number 13. If I get to hacking and coughing, you'll have to bear with me. Something about that singing a while ago got me an itch in my throat, and now I can't quite get it out. But Proverbs chapter 3, verse number 13. This morning we're going to talk about a very mighty word, wisdom. A word that we really need to focus on in our country that we live in, because I don't think there's much of it out there anymore. But what I want you to think about, though, as we go through this morning is, if I was to ask you what's the easiest way that you feel like you could obtain wisdom, what would your thoughts or answers be? And then this morning I want to give you a very simple answer that I think would be the greatest answer you could have. Open up the truth and you'll find wisdom. There's nothing that we have in life that we can't find an answer to if we open this book. Amen. But the first thing we have to figure out is, which book are you supposed to open? There are so many perversions of this book out there that has caused so much confusion, and that's where our wisdom has went down the drain. We need to get back to what is the original, the King James Version, 1611 Bible, and study those and know that that's the truth and be able to find the truth. I tell my kids quite often, if something is an original and you make a change to it, no longer is it the original. Amen. And this country doesn't understand that by no means, because if you get out now, you find that we have hundreds and hundreds of doctrines, hundreds and hundreds of different perversions of the Bible, so-called what they call the Bible. I only call one book the Bible, and that's the King James Bible. So as we look at that this morning, I want you to think, to be able to obtain wisdom, you have to know where the truth comes from that will give you that wisdom. So we'll start reading here in verse number 13, and I like the first word of this. If you find wisdom, what does the very first word say? Happy is the man that findeth wisdom, and the man that getteth understanding, for the merchandise of it is better than the merchandise of silver, and the gain thereof than fine gold. So as we read these next few verses, it's going to describe to us what a quality that wisdom really is, if you would obtain that wisdom in your life. So as we look at this, I want you to look at each of these descriptions and understand that if you have true wisdom, this is what you really have in your life. It says that we have a merchandise that is greater than silver. The gain thereof is greater than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things that canst desire are not to be compared unto her. Length of days is in her right hand, and in her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to them that lay hold upon her, and happy is every one that retaineth her. The Lord by wisdom hath founded the earth, by understanding hath he established the heavens. By his knowledge the depths are broken up, and the clouds drop down the dew. My son, let not them depart from thine eyes. Keep sound wisdom and discretion. So shall they be life unto thy soul, and grace to thy neck. Then shalt thou walk in thy way safely, and thy foot shall not stumble. When thou liest down, thou shalt not be afraid. Yea, thou shalt lie down, and thy sleep shall be sweet. Be not afraid of sudden fear, neither of the desolation of the wicked when it cometh. For the Lord shall be thy confidence, and shall keep thy foot from being taken. Withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of thine hand to do it. Say not unto thy neighbor, Go and come again, and tomorrow I will give, when thou hast it by thee. Devise not evil against thy neighbor, seeing he dwelleth securely by thee. Strive not with man without cause, if he have done thee no harm. Envy thou not the oppressor, and choose none of his ways. For the froward an abomination to the Lord, but his secret is with the righteous. The curse of the Lord is in the house of the wicked, but he blesseth the habitation of the just. Surely he scorneth the scorners, but he giveth grace unto the lowly. The wise shall inherit glory, but shame shall be the promotion of fools. You know, I really wouldn't have to say anything at all if we just look at these scriptures and read what they say about what wisdom is. It's a very good description here about how we could have wisdom. But I want to just point out a couple of things that I noticed as I read through this is, you know, it says that the Lord, by wisdom, in verse 19, hath founded the earth. You know, when God created the earth, and we look around us and we see the wonderful nature that we get to endure every single day, how great is it to know how great a God that we serve, that you could go outside in the night and you see stars just hanging in the sky. I mean, if that was one of us to do something like that, these stars would be falling all over people. But to know that we serve a God that is that mighty, that all he had to do is speak, and the sun rises every morning, it sets every evening, the moon comes out and still gives the shadow of light that we need for the night. Isn't it great to know that we serve that type of a God? There's nothing that he done that was a mistake. Nothing that he done that was wrong. Everything that he done was perfect. You know, as I sit through yesterday and watch the wedding of my fourth child, that's making me old. I don't know if you guys know that I'm getting old or not, but marrying off a fourth child makes you feel really old. But you know, to be able to stand and watch a union of two people and know that that's what God created, isn't it such a blessing to know that you have a God that you can serve, that no matter what you go through in life, after you make that commitment as they made yesterday, that God can take care of anything that we have. You know, I was thinking they're young. They're going to have to find out what life really is. I told him yesterday as he was leaving, I said, enjoy this week, because when you come back next week, you find out what life really is. This week's going to be fun. You're going to enjoy yourself. You get to come home next week, and now you realize, I have a wife to take care of. I have to pay my own bills now. I'm going to have to take care of my home. And then we learn what life really is. But you know, isn't it good to know that we have a God that no matter what that life throws us, he can take care of those things. As I was thinking of him yesterday, I was thinking of my marriage as well. Almost 30 years later, since I made that same commitment, God has always provided everything we needed for our marriage and our life. So I know he can do it for anybody else because I've seen it firsthand for myself. We've had times that I wondered how we were going to do and what our next step was going to be to do. And in my human nature, I tried a lot of times to take care of things on my own. But I'm thankful that the God that I serve always knew better than I knew and still took care of my situations, even when I made messes of some of those. And when I think about this wisdom, I think about as we age, how that wisdom should grow. We've seen things in our life. We've experienced things. We've went through things. Our wisdom should be much greater now than it was when we were their age and made that commitment they made yesterday. But that's what I want to indwell in us to think. You know, as these young people in our church are coming up, they need us to teach them this true wisdom. They need to understand that without God, their lives are going to be a mess. Because the ruler of this world, Satan, is going to try to destroy every one of our young people if we don't get God in their lives. And in order to have God in their life, there's only one way we can do that. We have to stand on this truth and teach them what the wisdom is of these words so they can learn that. And then I think of 14 through 18, the description that God gives us here of what wisdom is. You know, how many of you ladies love to have your jewelry? How many of you love to have your nails done, your hair done? Some of them was telling me yesterday about my wife getting her hair done or makeup done. My wife doesn't wear makeup, so it's like a once in a million that it happens. But most ladies like to do that on a daily basis. They love to have makeup done, hair done. I was talking with Brady and Abby the other day, and Abby was telling me, she said, I know my biggest thing that I'm going to have to worry on is how much I want to go spend on doing my nails, my hair. I said, yeah, those years are over, because you don't get to just choose to do that every day like you did when you was by yourself with no bills. But you know, I look at these verses and I think, there's none of us that doesn't desire to have nice things. We enjoy having nice things. But you know, the nicest thing that we could own here upon the earth, it tells us here that wisdom is even greater than those things. Having the knowledge and understanding of who God is and having Him as your personal Savior in your life is greater than anything that you could own upon the face of this earth. You know, I even find it thinking about your spouse, your children. It's even figured that wisdom is greater than having those things. And I find it a great blessing to be able to have a family and children going on my 10th grandchild. That makes me feel old also. But you know, to have those things is a wonderful blessing. But the older I get, the more I figure that this wisdom is teaching me that seeing those grow up to understand who God is and putting God first in their lives is even greater than having the children to begin with. It's a very important role that we have. Folks, we need to start getting serious about the lives that we live in front of our families, our children. I think we get to a point where we look at life as it's just another day. But that's not what we were left here upon the earth for. When Jesus Christ died and left from this earth, He left us something to do. And the Bible teaches us in Matthew, in that commission, the very first word says what? Does anybody tell me what that word says? Go. That's an action word. That means we have something to do. That's not that we just show up in a church pew, fill the church pew each time the service goes on, and that's good enough. That's not that we come to an altar and we give our heart to the Lord. Now I'm saved. That's good enough. You know, wouldn't it be a blessing to be able to stand before the Lord and not see your family on the other side, being judged and thrown into the pits of hell? Your friends, your loved ones. I would find it a much greater blessing to be able to know that all of my children, my grandchildren, my friends, family, they're all in the same line that I'm in, and we're all being able to enter. We need to start thinking about what our lives really are inflicting upon other people. We get busy. We can do everything else. But how much do we really serve God? How much of our life is really given to telling someone else about who Jesus is and what He's done for your life? So when I think about wisdom, I think about all those things about what have I left out in my almost 50 years of life? What's been the least important? And what's been the most important? You know, I'm a guy that most people here that know me will tell you that I get up early in the morning and it's still dark. I leave. A lot of times I come home and it's already dark again. Because I was taught as a boy that when you become a man and you take on a family, you are to provide. And I try to do that. But you know, now that I'm getting a little older, I realize that in that providing, I left out a lot of things. Giving time to your children, teaching them the qualities of life and the things of God is more important than giving them a hamburger for supper. I'm not trying to tell you you should starve your kids by no means, but I just want you to understand what the importance of life really should be. How many of you remember back when you were younger, people used to sit around a dining room table as families and have meals? How often do we see that now? You know, at my house, it's usually these 3 or 4 eat, then the next group comes in later on, an hour or two later, they grab something to eat because life has gotten so busy that we can't even sit down as a family anymore and have a meal together. The qualities of our life have decreased greatly over the last very short period of time. And the reason I feel that's happened is because we have lost the sight of what this wisdom means in God's Word. Understanding that God is that important in our lives and teaching others about who He is has deteriorated what we call families. We don't hardly have families anymore. You know, not only do we not sit down as families to eat, now we have to have his children comes over for dinner while her children goes to another house for dinner. The things that the Bible teaches, we went way away from. It also says that In verse number 17, her ways are ways of what? How pleasant is your life? Do you have more struggles than you have happiness? Do you feel like you're always striving for something greater in life? Always having troubles and problems? You know why we have those? Who tries to do a lot of things on their own besides me? We try to take care of things on our own and we forget who's in control of our life. And when we do that, we are denying what this wisdom teaches. Because if we let God have control, He tells us right here that we're going to have happiness, pleasantness. Life will be much easier because He knows everything that you need and everything that I need. He knows when we need it. He knows what's going to take place. How many of you know what's going to happen to you tomorrow? You know who does? So why don't we put our trust where it belongs? That way this wisdom will grow. Not only does it say that we'll have pleasantness, but verse number 16, I'm sure most of us would like in this room because of the age we're getting to. What does it say there? Length of what? Days. How many of you enjoy having a long, healthy life? You know, when I hit my 40s, I started falling apart. Knee surgeries, back aches. Some mornings you don't want to get out of bed because you don't feel like you can even walk. Before that, I played sports 4 or 5 days a week. Felt like I could do anything I wanted. Wouldn't it be nice just to have a long, healthy life with no pains, no aches? God tells us that if we do things His way, that we could have that length of days. I'm not going to tell you the greater part to say you're not going to have no pains, because the Bible teaches we're going to have pains. We're going to have troubles. But if you serve God and put God first, even when those troubles come, He's going to take care of the troubles. They would be much easier to endure if we let God do them instead of us trying to do it forever on our own. Has anybody in here ever fell down a ladder before? Slide down the rungs of a ladder. It don't feel very good, does it? I've done it a few times. I climb ladders quite often. I look at our lives and I kindly think of that. When I slide down that ladder, you know, God will get us right where we need to be at. And we're like, okay, now I can do it. It's pretty easy. Life's going easy. You know where we end up at? Right down the ladder. And we're on the bottom again. You know when we usually call upon God? When we climb off of the bottom of that ladder, all bruised up and banged up because we fell to the bottom, and we call upon the Lord and ask the Lord to take care of our situation. Wouldn't it have been so much easier just to stay on that top rung and just kept floating right on through where life was easy and just let God have control of it while we're there? Because let me tell you a secret. If you make it to the top rung of the ladder, guess who got you there? You didn't do that on your own. God put us right there because that's where we belonged at. I was thinking as they joined together yesterday, another thing that comes to my mind is with this is when you pick your mate in life, did you seek God to find that person? Or did you do it on your own? Then I look around and I see where families have went, And I find that a lot of people have sought their mates on their own. I look around our church and I think of how often do we seek God to find out where He would have us to serve at? I was talking to a guy the other day, and he was telling me about his grandmother serving in a church. It's a guy that I work with. He said his grandmother's been in the same church for 35 years. So I asked him the question. I said, is that the church that your grandmother should be serving in according to the Lord? He said, it's funny you should ask me that because I talk to my grandma all the time, and I think she just goes there because that's where her parents went when she was young. She tells them all the time how she don't get nothing from the services. So two things hit my mind when I was talking to him, and it made me think of this passage of Scripture I've been looking at. If she is not getting nothing from the service, number one, I don't feel like that's where God have her to be at. But not only that, what kind of testimony is she being to her grandchildren? Because these guys don't go to church. Of telling them that she just attends a church because family went there, but there's nothing there. Do you really think that's going to interest those grandsons in going to church? If I go home every day and I tell my kids that I didn't enjoy anything about my church service today, and that's the mentality I give them about church, do you think they really want to serve in church and serve God? So that made me really have to think this week of wondering how you can approach those guys and make them understand that church service is much greater than sitting in a pew because your parents sit in that pew. Serving God is much different than just going to a church because your family went to that church your whole life. In order for us to have this true wisdom that God would have us to have, the first thing we need to do is seek the will of God for your life individually. Find out what it is that God would have you to do, because God has something for all of His children to do. If we are born again and one of His, there is something that we're supposed to be doing. And I can promise you that nowhere in this book does it say that just sitting in a church pew, because your family sit in that church pew, is what He would have you to do. Not only just sitting in a church pew because your family sit there, but sitting in a church pew and doing nothing for the Lord is not what His will would be for any of our lives. And when I tell you these things, I'm telling you these things because when I teach a class, I look back at my life and God gives me what I needed or what I need currently in my life before I ever bring a lesson to anybody else. Because when I open this book up to study, there's always something here that tells me things that I need to do different than what I'm doing right now. Just because we come to church faithful, sit in a pew faithful, maybe get up and lead a song, maybe stand and teach Sunday school, whatever we might be doing, that still don't make us fully complete where we need to be at in our lives. Just because we're the older group of the church and we've been here the longest, doesn't mean that we're always exactly where we need to be at in our life. Guys, no matter how close we think we get to where we think we need to be at in the eyes of God, we need to do more. Because we're always going to be sinners in need of God and His help. This wisdom is something we really need to look at for our lives. How much are we in this Word, learning what it teaches? Then once we get in there and we learn what it teaches, more importantly than that, how much do we put it into action in our lives each day? I want us to think as we're closing here, wouldn't it be great to be able to take this description of this word wisdom and have all that in your life? The happiness, the peacefulness. I think we all could enjoy that much better than what we enjoy every single day of our life now. And I love my life. But I know if I could get closer to God like I should, it would even be better than it is now. Because the closer we get to the Lord, the more I feel like we see who His Son really is. Because we get to enjoy those blessings much more. Let's pray. Lord, as we come to you this morning, we do come to you with grateful and thankful hearts. Lord, we're so thankful for the many blessings of life. We thank you for this day that you blessed us with on this Lord's Day to be able to come together and worship you. Lord, I pray that you just meet with us in our service here today. I pray you be with our pastor. Lord, give us the very words that you'd have to be said. Most of all, Lord, as each person comes in today, Lord, I pray that hearts will be open and receptive. Lord, if there be a soul here today that doesn't know you as Lord and Savior, I pray, Lord, that you just deal with that heart. Lord, help them to realize how important that decision is, that they make that decision today. We love you, Lord, and we need you in all things. We ask this all in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.